So Israel and Lebanon, right, have a long-standing dispute over the maritime border, and it's particularly acute because of the enormous natural gas resources in this territory. So we don't yet have the full details of an agreement, but according to reports, Israel is prepared to surrender to Lebanon territory south of the disputed territory. So this territory is agreed upon universally that this belongs to Israel. For years, Israel has issued economic licenses to companies to act in this territory. So according to Israeli constitutional law, the transfer of territory under Israeli jurisdiction requires a referendum. And according to Israel, the Israeli maritime territory law from the 1950s, Israeli law extends to the coastal shelf. So this is a basic constitutional requirement for a referendum before any Israeli territory can be essentially surrendered to Lebanon.
When Israeli forces withdrew from South Lebanon in the year 2000, the two countries agreed then to a blue line border demarcating the exact border, but there was no referendum back then. So what's the difference here?
Well, first, the Israeli referendum basic law was only passed in 2014. Furthermore, the disputed territory between Israel and Lebanon, I mean, there is a question of whether Israeli law or jurisdiction applies to that area. But the territory that's being discussed now is south of that line. It's territory that there is no dispute that it is under Israeli jurisdiction.
So your organization, Cahlet, a few weeks ago petitioned the High Court demanding a referendum if there is an agreement. What happened with that?
So the application was rejected on technical grounds. The court held that diplomatic channels need to be exhausted before the case could go forward. But now, several weeks later, as more worrying reports are coming out, we plan to reapply before the court.
Isn't this, though, a very technical agreement involving questions of the location underwater, of gas fields, etc.? Maybe it's something that is so complex it can't be decided by people going to a referendum.
Well, I mean, that is basically the issue, right? Israeli constitutional law requires a referendum. It was precisely for that purpose that this basic law was passed in 2014. And furthermore, right, we oppose, right, the government surrendering, right, Israeli law in a completely non-transparent manner, right? This law was passed to prevent, capricious, you could argue, surrender of Israeli territory. And certainly, when you have a transitional government with no public mandate, right, the only way that Israeli law, the only way there's legitimacy to surrender Israeli territory is by fulfilling the legal requirement of holding a referendum.
Do you envisage a scenario under which, theoretically, Israel and Lebanon do come to an agreement on a maritime border and a future right-wing government would try to overturn this or not accept this?
I'm not sure, right? Cahlet does not oppose, right, any dispute per se, any resolution of the dispute per se, right? In fact, we support the resolution of the dispute. It's in the interest of both nations to be able to start processing the natural gas. However, right, we oppose the surrender of Israeli territory in a manner contrary to Israeli law, in a non-transparent manner, and by a government that has no public mandate.